Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm welcome to James Jones.
Thank you very much. I think that one of the most important aspects of what I can give to you today is to share with you some of the happy and unhappy experiences of my life. This morning is a little hard for me. I'm coming from my pain place. I'm coming from where it hurts. This afternoon is going to be lots of fun. There's going to be lots of kidding, lots of fancy things you can do with your kids that'll help you to not get your kids under control, but to get you under control. And to change yourself, you change the environment. And when the environment changes, your children change. But early today, this morning, I want to talk to you about some of the things that went wrong in our home, in our family. And it isn't important that you understand who I am or what my problems were, except I don't know what your problems are. But I know that your family is very similar to mine in many respects. I know that most families are dysfunctional. As a counselor, as I sit and I talk with people, I see the pain. And the greatest tragedy I see is that they're in denial and they do not know what's happening in their homes. They know something's wrong. Marriages are breaking up. Kids are running away from home. There's shouting and bitterness instead of love and harmony in the home. There's competition and meanness and littleness, and people are nasty and struggling for power, upset because other people are not doing what they think they ought to be doing, children not working, being lazy, and all of these things are piling up. I really believe that there's many, many forces in America today, in the world today, that are pounding and assailing the American home. Homes all over. And unless we do something and begin to understand what's happening in our homes dysfunctionally, what is not happening in a healthy way, until we come to grips with this and start to come out of our dark ages of parenting, we're going to suffer a great deal. We're going to continue to see the destruction of the home in America. And because of that, being a victim of that circumstance, I find myself some 7-8 years after my son got into drugs, standing before you here, because at one time I was very, very desperate. I don't pretend to have all the answers, even most of the answers, but I do have some of the answers where I had none of the answers before. When my son got onto drugs, my whole world fell apart. I was very well organized, a very strong individual. All you do is work harder. And if the kid's not doing what he's supposed to do, just sit him down and explain it. And if that doesn't work, then you sit him down for an hour and a half and explain it. And if that doesn't work, you get out the paddle. And I was into power, and I was into control, because that's the way I was raised. That's the way I thought families functioned. Families don't function that way. They dysfunction that way. And as a result, I really got tweaked when I was a little kid. And I came up into my family when I married a woman. I brought all that garbage, all that stuff I packed into that relationship. And it made it very, very difficult. I have a hard time with intimacy, a hard time opening up, a hard time recognizing my feelings, because I've got to be all male, all macho. Only weenies cry. Only wimps have feelings. And so I was taught that you don't have feelings. I'm going to get into that a little bit. But what I intend to say first is kind of a disclaimer. I want you to know that I love my mother and my father a great deal. They're wonderful people. And they did the very, very best that they knew how. Each of them came from a very dysfunctional family. Each of them was in great pain when they married. My poor mom was just past 18 when I was born. She was just past 17. Just 18 years old, and got married, got out of her home, and married a man, my father, 25 years of age, or 24 at that time, I guess, who was very dysfunctional, already basically alcoholic, who came from a home where there was tremendous religious pressure, tremendous tension in the home to conform. Grandma was very, very controlling. And so Papa had a real problem in his life, to conform or something else. Very difficult. When these two came together and had children, they created an atmosphere that was full of tension, lots of problems. We're going to talk about that. So I want to talk about my family, not because I'm so egocentric, but because I want you to know that I'm just very, very typical. In fact, I came from a very good home, really, in many respects, and yet a very dysfunctional family. And so I love my parents, and the things that I say to you today about my father and my mother are sharing confidences that are delicate and tender to me. And I don't do that lightly, but I want you to know they're wonderful people, and I love them very dearly. They're working through their problems, they're working through their dysfunction, but it's very painful. So somebody, driving a truck accidentally might back over you and break both of your legs. Now that was unintentional. Because it was unintentional, though, you can't say it doesn't matter. And you can't deny the fact. I have to take care of my injuries. I have to take care of my dysfunction, my fears, my anger, my rage over how I was raised. Because I'm passing that on to my children. And I want to show you that today. I believe that there's many things that could be said. Many things won't be said. But I want you to relate to what is said. Okay, let's get started. I'm going to talk about Erikson's 8 stages of man. We're only going to talk about 6 here. We'll take it up to about age 18. And I want you to compare that as we talk today, back and forth. Because in the development of a human being, there are very, very many good characteristics that we would like to see developed. Drive and hope, self-control and willpower, direction and purpose in their life, method and competence, devotion and fidelity, affiliation and love. Each of these is at a stage of development, of human development, where there is a crisis. Erikson believed that you come to a certain point and either you develop the skill to get along in this world or you don't develop it. And if you're really tweaked and don't develop here, supposedly at age 0 to 1 here during the first year of life, and you begin to mistrust the world instead of trusting the world, then you carry with you those feelings through adulthood. And you develop a script in life where you don't trust people. And it's hard for you then to be intimate. As you go through these developmental stages, the task to be developed is different in each one of these. In the early on, this infant, the major task that that child has is to find out if the world is happy or the world is unhappy, if it's safe or it's dangerous. And each one of you came into a home with a different environment, with different dynamics between mom and dad. Dad came into that relationship with certain strengths and weaknesses, and so did mom. And they developed a certain environment in that home that you sensed. They've done tests on babies before they were born, in the womb yet. And they could tell by the chemicals in their blood if that child was upset or not. We know drugs affect a child. We know what the mother eats affects a child even before it's born. But they hear music. They have all kinds of experiences in the womb. And the child, as it begins to understand and begin to hear and pick up through its sensory capacity the environment around them, begins to interpret. And they begin to decide, not necessarily at a real conscious level, but they decide whether this world is a safe place or not. If the caretakers are loving and kind and gentle, and through touching, a child develops trust. Or mistrust, if that child is yanked around and not changed when it's soiled. And the child, there's a lot of confusion in the house and the child is frightened and there's loud noises. Do you think a child picks that up? Even an infant, do you think they can pick up the tension with mother the way she holds that child or doesn't hold that child? Through touching and stroking, this is where that child begins to feel if the world is safe or not. We all need strokes, lots of strokes. And if we don't get strokes, then we'll get them the bad way. Sometimes children that are in hospitals for one reason or another, wars or orphans or something, these children don't develop because they're not touched. They're not nurtured. They're laid in a crib and then they're fed. And there's so few nurses, there's not a place to take care of them. There's no one to watch them, really. And so the children are neglected. And there's a thing called marasmus, where these children fail to thrive. It's through touching and human relationships that we have happiness and that we have joy, also misery. But without that, with that void, with this idea that I'm not touched, I'm not loved, the world isn't happy, the world isn't safe because of all the noise, I might even be abused. I might wake a dad up at 3 o'clock in the morning crying, and I'm hurting in my stomach. I can't communicate except through crying, and I'm crying and they feed me and they try to burp me, and Papa ends up hitting me. Shut up. I got to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning. You've been screaming all night. You see, I can't have all trust or I'd be a nut. There has to be a balance between trust and mistrust. But generally, the first task of a human being is to find out whether people are good or bad, whether I'm okay or not, whether the world is safe or not. Now, supposing I'm raised in a confusing, loud, harmful environment. You know, this little computer's got nothing on it. It's got a blank sheet here. And what I'm recording is that the world isn't very nice. It's not very safe. Do you think that's going to affect me in intimacy later on? Do you think that's going to affect how I trust and how I feel about people? Do you think how it's going to trust how I feel about myself? Absolutely. So the first thing is trust. And if I have trust in my life, and I feel that the world is trustworthy and people are good, basically, with some exceptions, then I have the ability to have hope. Because if the world is predictable, all right, I can make decisions, I can hope, I can try. Now, in all of these things that Erikson was talking about, he talked about each level as a crisis. That either we make it and solve the task at that level and decide on trust or mistrust or whatever that particular skill is, whatever that crisis is, and if we do it, we develop a strength in our personality of self-control and willpower. Let's just do this one for a second. When a child is small, it's really in a symbiotic relationship with its parent. And the child can hardly tell, doesn't tell the difference between himself or herself. He has no self-awareness really. Can't tell the difference between himself and his mother's breast. They're just one. He can't tell the difference. As a child begins to get a little older, they begin to have a certain autonomy. And the child is raised in an environment then that whether either the child is allowed his emotions, his own emotions, or he's not allowed his own emotions. You stop that crying right now. You stop that. There's nothing to be afraid of. And the parent is saying, basically, you think what I think, or you feel what I feel. You do what I say. And if the child is allowed to make certain decisions in life, then the child develops a sense of autonomy, that I'm different, that I have a willpower. Can you see where they're talking here? Willpower and self-control. If some other person is always telling me what to do, I'm a part of their will and their life and their thing, and don't develop my own selfness, my own identity, this autonomy here, then I will never, ever feel good about myself. I will have a certain amount of shame and doubt. And why would I have any willpower? Why would I have any self-control? I would have other control, somebody telling me what to do all the time. If you've got a child in this range, would it be wise for you to understand that that child needs to gain a sense of autonomy? Should we raise children without any conception of that at all? That I should tell this child what to do all the time? Or should I concentrate on things that will allow this child to feel that autonomy, to make decisions, to set certain goals down here, to begin to have their own self-control? Freud talks about this as they go through a retentive thing. It's time where you're learning to hold on and let go of things. And this is an important aspect because I decide if I will let go. You'll find the little child discovers gravity. He'll take his glass and hold it off the edge of the high chair and you'll go, ah! And before you can get there, what's happened? Smash. And you're cleaning that up and off the other side goes the dish. And they're not being bad. You can't say, what a wicked little child. Why did God do this to me? The child is learning to hold on and let go, to exercise some self-control and willpower in his own life. And this is a very essential task. But if the child is not allowed to make these decisions, I don't care if it's just deciding what toys he's going to have. You ever get these children say, no, they're getting this? A child hears no about 40,000 times before they go to kindergarten. Would you believe that? And guess who they hear it from, Mom? But this autonomy thing is a very important thing. Do you really, really want to raise a child that does just exactly what you want and thinks what you want them to think? Is that the kind of being that you want? Yeah, mothers are going like this. Okay. No, you don't. Who let her in? Okay. No, you don't want to. You want to raise a human being with feelings and thoughts and a determination. And if that child is told that it's wrong to have autonomy, to do things on your own, that child then will develop shame and doubt. And shame is a very big word today in psychology. It's a very big word, and we're going to talk about that. Okay, do you want a child that has willpower, that has self-control? Would you like that? You say, my teenagers don't have any self-control at all. They have no ability to defer gratification. They just have not developed willpower. Why not? Erikson suggests that these are very early messages. These are very early developmental skills that they get into. I would like to know as a parent, if I could just have my kids back and do it again, maybe I could do a lot better job. I want you to know that I knew nothing. When I was in business, I had to have a license to open the door. If you want to do fingernails, you have to have a license. If you want to get married, you got to have a license, right? Is that true? To raise kids, what do you need? You have nothing. And it's not required. And maybe that's really great too. But it's sad that in America, we send people to school to study everything in the world, how to make a living, how to be an engineer, how to be a doctor, and we're not dealing with the most critical issues of life, and that's how to develop as human beings and to be happy. You can have all the money in the bank. I've talked to guys that have dads that got millions of dollars. Here, kid, here's 20 grand, take a tour around the world. Do what you want to do. Happy birthday. The same dad, and this is a true story, I was counseling with this boy recently again, and he's got this big thing about his dad. He had to make an appointment with his father's secretary to see his dad. I'm not suggesting that you all get a secretary. That's not the direction I'm going. I'm suggesting that this father was so focused on his business that he didn't have to deal with the pain of raising a family. He didn't have to deal with his issues as a man, and boy, he's got some. He is driven. He's a workaholic. He is addicted. But as long as he's into his addiction and practicing his addiction, which in his case isn't booze, isn't women, it's work. It's just as sick, but he's neglected that family. And as long as he's addicted over here, that takes all his energy and all his focus, he does not have to deal with this boy here that he does not know how to relate to. And the boy's getting angry. He got a mitt for Christmas. He was really embarrassed. He was like in his teens. People, it was for the wrong hand. The dad didn't even know if he was left or right-handed. That's a true story. Is that tragic? A lot worse things than that are happening. And when we get angry and we know that we're doing something wrong, our emotions overpower our good sense, and then we just don't give a toot. I'm mad and I don't care. I know this is wrong. I'm getting it wrong and I don't care. I'm going to bust you one. We want children to grow up with these particular strengths. I had a friend, little Benny. I grew up with him. And little Benny got to do anything he wanted to do. My folks were strict. Little Benny got to ride the bus down to the pier and fish. Then he'd go to a movie. And I'd try to talk my mom into that. I was 10, 12 years old. I'd try to talk her into that. She'd say, no, son, you can't go. Mom! And I would beg and plead, please let me go. All the other kids are going. Do you know the story? All the other kids are going. Everybody's, you're the only ogre ma in the whole world. And they've got your picture down at the post office as being the meanest woman in the world. And you won't let me go to catch a stinking fish. Son, it isn't that. I love you and I'm worried about you. Inside, how did I feel, people? I knew she loved me. And even though she wouldn't let me go, she was worried for me. She was hypervigilant. But she was scared to death. Now, little Benny got to do anything he wants. And as a result, all he'd do if he wanted to do something was whine and cry and bellyache and scream until Mom finally gave in. Little Benny's had about 5 or 6 wives. Got about 10 or 12 children around the country. Not all in marriage, which I kind of look at as the wrong way to do things. He did anything he wanted. All he did is scream and yell. Never told no. Never learned what no meant. What is there about no that you don't understand? But little Benny's life is tragic. And then his parents stand back and say, we never raised him like that. We can't understand why he's such a bum. We never raised him like that. Well, they did. That's exactly the way they raised him. They gave in to him. They were not concerned with his development. Whatever was easiest for the parents, they gave in, and that's what they did. I think that needs to be a very important aspect of what we do and what we say here today, is that real love has to do with doing for that child what needs to be done for that child and that child's development. And a lot of times what a child needs is a real good dose of consequences, a real good dose of pain. And if a parent steps in and rescues that kid, there's some real tragedies there. All right, so to give you an idea of what is going on here with Erikson stuff is kind of a little background. From 3 to 6, we allow this child to take the initiative. Here to make goals, to choose. They begin to see that they have agency. And they begin to understand, too, that there are consequences for these choices. This is very important. But if we don't allow them to make choices, they feel guilty about it later on in life because they were not allowed. It's like something is wrong. I'll do it for you. Here, I'll do it. Allow the child their little choices and see that they're into choices. And then they get direction and purpose. In 6 to 12, this is so very important. You look up there. That's industry versus inferiority. Industry versus inferiority. A person learns to work. They learn to struggle. They learn to defer gratification. They learn to save and to buy with their savings. And if a person doesn't learn to earn and doesn't learn to work, they feel inferior because they do not develop the skills that are required to survive in this environment. And 6 to 12, if your children haven't got a lot of responsibility in the home, then I think that's a grave error, within reason. To know how to handle responsibility, you've got to have responsibility. But not my teeny tot, not my little Herkimer. Little Herkimer, oh no, I had to work when I was a kid, and I swore that I would not ever have my kids work like I had to work. Man, that is the curse of the generation. Some of these people out of the Depression, guess what they were saying? Boy, my kids will never have to work like I did. And they didn't. And they did not develop the sense of integrity. They did not develop the self-esteem that comes from being able to work and earn. A lot of people have said that the ability to earn is your self-worth. Now that can be carried way too far because that's got nothing to do with real worth. But esteem is built up and is supported by the fact that I can support my family. I can take care of myself. I have skills. I can get along in this world. But we're raising little Herkimer here. Why? He's got to do his studies. And he's on the soccer team. And he's on this other team. And little sister has to take ballet right after piano. And we got these little turkeys running all over the world, but they don't have any work. And mama's picking up their room and cleaning the toilet that they use and preparing the meals, doing everything, providing everything in the world. And then we raise them through this age, and we get them up into here, and we've allowed them to be on what we call teenage retirement. Teenage retirement is a condition, a malady that's inflicted upon children by messed up parents. All right? Wherein the child has everything in the world provided for them. Everything. The TV, the bedding, the beds, everything. Transportation, all the sports equipment. Just open the closet. There's 180,000 games, bedding, telephones, television, curlers, you name it. Everything is provided. The toilet paper fairy magically appears and puts the toilet paper on the roll. Because nitwit, you set it in the bathroom, they never figured out how to work that roll thing. And if mama doesn't put it, do you know what I'm saying? Yeah? No, I'm not speaking of your husband, ma'am, okay? At any rate, basically, that child does nothing. And here a child is very egocentric up in here, and they're thinking magically, non-logical in this age group here, before age 8 about. And they're non-logical. And nature provided that they should be very egocentric. That kid has no clue that you got a migraine headache. They cannot put themselves in your place. They cannot feel empathy for other people yet at these ages, these early ages. Got no clue for you. They don't give a toot about your mental health. They don't care whether they drive you off to Happy Neverland in a straitjacket or not. They're going to say, why, one more time. And that just might be it. You know, and that just does it for you. They do not care. They're not into that. Now, we reinforce this egocentric thinking far beyond a healthy limit. Back in here, the child should be doing initiative stuff. But here they start to work. They really, really start to work. And if we raise a teenager into here that's still thinking nothing but themselves and only about themselves, that's not doing anything, we're part and parcel responsible for that tragedy. And we raise children that go out at age 18 or 19 to college that don't know how to hold down a job, don't know how to apply a job, and some of them don't know how to comb their hair or how to dress or how to address an employer. They have absolutely no skills at all. They don't know about a checkbook, a banking account, budgeting, fixing meals, cleaning up, clothes. They know nothing, some of them. I was a head resident in a girls' dormitory. Well, I was married, and there was 235 girls in this dormitory. And one of the girls came to me and said, Mr. Jones, can you please tell me, how do I mop a floor? Because there are mothers out there, people, who find that it's too much trouble to have that kid learn how to cook. They make too big a mess. And mama can do it better herself, faster herself. And there are some girls that come out of some of these homes where the home is immaculate and the kid has no skills. People, when you have a family and you get a house, the neatest house in the world is not what life is all about. When the children look back and they're age 15, they look back at you, are they going to say, Mom, thank you for such a neat house? I really appreciate how you kept the bathroom, how you scrubbed out the sink, and how you did all of these things. I really appreciate how nice the lawn was cut. And I mean, within certain limits, isn't that okay? Mom, you taught me order, you taught me how to work, that's great. What's really going on in life that isn't happening? The relationships. We're not building the relationships. And part of what we're going to talk about today is how we are alienating these kids and not satisfying their basic needs. Okay, are you getting some feel for this? Age 6 to 12, Mom and Dad, what should you really be thinking about? What's the essential task according to Erikson? What is it? It's to learn to work, to see a job through, to have a sense of pride, a sense of competence, to develop the skills to get along in life. A lot of this has to do with school skills, but a lot of it has to do with other stuff. And I can remember I was about 8, 9, something like that, and the folks put me out in the backyard to clean the backyard. And it was a huge backyard, acres. And I had to clean all the apricot tree leaves. And we raised rabbits. It was during the war for meat. And I had to get all those little round deals up off the floor. And I can remember, and I went back as an adult to see that. It was only about this big, you know. But I can remember pushing that lawnmower in that front. It was just a little teeny postage stamp lawn. But I can remember up here pushing that lawnmower and doing that because I liked that. I like to do that. And I had all the rake marks just right under the tree. And a leaf would fall down again when I was almost done. I'd go pick it up and then rake out my footprints. And boy, that was just so neat. And I stood back and looked at that. And it was only about this big, folks. I'm not kidding. Wow. And I thought, boy, that feels good. I really worked hard. And look what I was able to do. Was that a sense of power? Was that a sense of skill? Was that a sense of inferiority? Or was it a sense of industry? And my dad and mom come out and say, hey, that's good. That's really good. Now go do the front yard. Okay. And I used to get up on Saturday morning and fix the folks' breakfast. And you can say that's dumb, but I enjoyed it. Is that goofy? I felt like they liked me if I did that. Kind of a pleaser thing, kind of a sick thing. I got a little problem with that, okay? But I can remember thinking, you know, I feel better working, and when I work and get a job, I feel better than when I'm out playing. Talk about a sick kid, right? No. Can you see, though, there's a place for that? What if a child won't play? Now, in my home, I kind of got a message, don't be a child. And so I was the oldest, and a lot of times in the sibling position, which some people feel is the most important aspect of who you are, is how you were raised as a first child or a middle child or a last child, and how it affects your relationship and how you parent. That's a very important thing. But I can remember as I was able to get the feeling of industry, get the feeling, a sense of working, that I felt accepted by my folks. I felt like they approved of me, all right? And that's not all.
This concludes the program on this side of the cassette. To continue the program, please turn the cassette over.
All right, now, identity versus role confusion. Let's look at that. Erikson suggests that between 12 and 18, a child now has gotten into formal operational thinking, okay? They can now think in abstracts and think about what they're thinking about and go through lots of stuff that these earlier kids could not. Now, from about 8 on, they get logical. Prior to age 8, kids are magical. There's Santa Claus, and there's these great giants in their life. If mom wills it so, it can be so. Moms provide everything. Moms can do everything. You get hurt, you run to who? Mom, because she will fix it or kiss it or whatever. All right? And that'll make it all better. So kids are very non-logical, very egocentric, very magical thinking. They're not logical at all. Around age 8, something begins to happen, and they begin to be able to think in a lot different sense. Okay? But at age 12 to 18, they're starting to get developed cognitively. And they're starting to get an idea of identity. Now, what does this mean? This is one of the most significant and important aspects of what you'll see on this chart today. And that is this, that as they look at identity, they're going to try on all kinds of roles. It's got nothing to do with hating mom and dad. It's got nothing to do with being disloyal to you. At this time, the peer group can become a much more significant factor, unfortunately, than the parent. And the reason for that is that the biological clock is going. What we call puberty starts at about 12, okay? That's when they get all goofy. I don't think my son, one of them, David, smiled for 3 years. He had braces on his teeth and he hunched over and walked around. He had a frown on his face for 3 years. He come back human about 17 or 18. But for that time in there, he was somebody else. He didn't know who he was. But this is where these kids start to figure out who they are. Who am I? And I am who I am because of what I believe and what I think and what I feel. I. It's not what mom and dad think. It's not what mom and dad believe. And some kids that got a lot of spunk, they're tired of mom and dad telling them what to do. In fact, they're afraid of mom and dad telling them what to do because they're not developing. They don't feel like they're getting big. And if you say blue, they say what? Green. And if you say up, they say what? Down. And they're making a statement that I'm a different person. I have a right to be different. I am different. I feel different. And at this point in time, they try on all these different roles. And some of those roles are very rebellious. Some of those roles aren't really for real. They're just trying them on. But they are deciding some of the very deep existential problems of their lives. Of who am I? Who am I? What do I believe? What's my non-negotiable self? Who am I really? And what do I think and what do I feel? No, Dad, be quiet, Dad. I know what you think. I know what you feel. I've heard it for 18 years. Mom, I know what I should do. Anybody ever hear anything like that? Will you get off my case? Now, at once, they want to be connected to mom and dad. On the other hand, they want to be what? Separated. And they're growing up. And this is biologically necessary. And sometimes the bond is so tight that the only way that kid can separate is by a rupture. If we're not, as parents, willing to let go graciously and understand the dynamics of this concept, that they're individuating, that they need to feel separate, they need to feel independent. Does this make sense? And if we hang on and smother, okay, not mother, but smother, and we're on to them and we're controlling and we're telling them what to think and telling them what's right and do this and do that and it's green, not blue, and it's Republican, not Democrat, or whatever that might be, they don't feel that they have the agency, the right, the ability, the freedom, the space to solve this problem of who they are. Now, I can say to my son, this is what I believe. And this is how I feel. And this is why I think I feel this way. And this is what I treasure. And this is what I despise. And these are my prejudices. And these are my loves. And these are my, okay? As dad and mom. And mom and dad, if they understand this boundary thing, are careful to show this is how I feel. This is what I believe. And son, I hope that you will embrace these principles, these virtuous principles that we believe in so dearly. That these are the principles of integrity and honesty and sacrifice and loving and kind stuff, not selfishness. And these are the characteristics that we treasure, and these are the things we have found that bring us happiness. Now, you're free. You're going to have to look at this. You're going to have to decide what you believe. You're going to have to decide how you feel about stuff. I know how I feel as your dad. But you have the right, the sacred right, to be a person, to believe and to think and to feel what you want to feel. Is that scary? Because every time I did it, my kid would screw up. I'd sit back there nobly and say, son, this is your decision. And what did he do every time? And I says, forget that nonsense. As soon as you're smart enough to know what to do, then I'll give you your freedom. How does that solve it? Somebody talked about writing a book on free agency and how to enforce it. Okay, I love that. See, we're willing to go along with this ridiculous program that we're presenting today as long as the kids do everything they're supposed to do. As long as their identity conforms with what we think that identity should be. And these are our kids, and by golly, if I've done a good job as a parent, those kids should be exactly what I want. Isn't that true? Hogwash. If you think that, you're from another planet. You haven't been watching what's been going on. Do you understand that there needs to be an underlying sense of great respect for this humanness, this beingness of this other person? Do you understand? That there's a sacredness that you as a parent, just because you're a parent, have no license to infringe over those boundaries. I think we can say, this is what I believe, this is what I think, but it's up to you to decide. I think we're too anxious to see that the kids do it right. Now, of course, I didn't make any mistakes as a child or as a teenager. I didn't make any. I had it all figured out, right? Did you make some? Yes, you did. Now, does a child have the right to make some mistakes? If you create an environment where mistakes are not okay, you're going to limit some of this stuff. And when they make a mistake, they're going to feel guilty. You say, get up and try it again. You see that skateboard that kid saved for 3 months. $130 skateboard. You see it out there in the rain in the front. Because when he came home, he was thirsty with his buddy and his favorite Captain Kangaroo movie was on, or whatever it was, his Nintendo game was waiting. He came running, and you see through the front door, through the window, you see that skateboard and it's pouring rain. And what do? You pick it up and put it there. Well, usually you go out and get it and then give them a lecture. Haven't you got any sense of responsibility? When I was your age, I walked to school 5 miles uphill and back uphill in 4 feet of snow. And I never left my skateboard out. Not one time. And I milked 500 cows in the morning before I left. And they're saying, yeah. What if you just left that skateboard out there and unfortunately in the morning it's gone? Do you think that kid's going to learn more saving for another skateboard than 500 lectures from you? I promise you they're going to learn from that. And they can be really upset. But who can they be upset with? But we nag and we nag and we nag. All right. Do you get an idea here? Now, if I have the basic idea of trust, and I don't have shame and doubt, I'm a person with a right to how I feel and what I'm doing. I have the initiative, I have direction in my life, I have the skills to produce and to build and create, and the satisfaction that comes from all of these. And I have an identity, I have an idea of what my life is about, what I want, what's important in my life. And now I come to this great thing of 18 to 35, where we get into intimacy or loneliness. Intimacy or isolation, Erikson says. Of course, we would like to have love, wouldn't we, and affection. Well, shouldn't that be the happy lot of all of us? To have somebody that's close to us? To have somebody that's really close, that we can confide in, a very, very best friend? Someone that loves us? But the problem is that if you've got shame and doubt, and if you don't develop that way, do you think I want to sit here in front of a girl that I respect and open up my soul? What is she going to see? In my life, I will tell you, I don't want that because I don't feel very good about myself. I don't feel good at all about myself. I feel very, very badly about myself. I think if you were to open me up and look at me, there would be nothing praiseworthy or good to see. Because I came from a shame-bound home where we were all getting murdered. My father was shameless. He was full of shame, and so full of shame that he compensated by acting shameless. Always, always, he had to be right. In the most ridiculous instances, he always had to be right, which made me always what? Wrong. And he's the authority in my life. So I began to think there's something wrong with me. I could never do anything quite good enough to me. It seemed like I could never, ever get that praise that I needed. I was always struggling. My life has become an effort to compensate for how bad I feel. That's the basis of addictions, that we start to try to make up and get rid of the pain. We medicate our pain about how bad we feel about ourselves with drugs or alcohol or sex, work, buying, spending, We medicate that. All right, if I want intimacy, I've got to feel good about myself. I've got to feel confident about myself to open up. And if I've got parents that are always criticizing and it's never good enough, parents who have these unrealistic expectations about me, how on earth will I ever feel okay about myself? How on earth will I ever feel safe and secure to open up? I would like to be able to open up and my wife say, I see everything about you. I see everything about you. You're a good man. I love you just like you are. And I don't have to shrink away. And I don't have to feel ashamed. I don't have to be guarded and make myself obscure from her gaze. Do you understand where I'm coming from? Now, I'm ashamed. How many of you feel that you're really kind of not okay? Could I see by hands? Are you brave enough already? Raise them up high. You feel there's something wrong. If we were open up, we wouldn't like you. Okay, that's a big majority. You come from shame homes. And the rest of you that didn't raise your hand, okay, you just don't know what we're talking about yet. Because we come from this. I don't think that there's really, I think 95, 100% of the homes have these difficulties. Nobody's perfect. And my dad didn't have a prayer coming out of the home he came out of. My mom didn't have a prayer coming out of the home she came out of. There's no way that she could raise a healthy kid. So you see what you got here. But see what happens, the tragedy of this is that I pass my insecurities, my shame onto my kids. And they pick it up, big old chunks of this shame. They just pick it up. Because as I said, my dad acted shameless in a way to show that he wasn't shamed at all. He couldn't be. He didn't want to be shamed. I asked my wife, sweetheart, do you love me? She says, yes, I love you. Why would I ask a question like that? I mean, she's not running off with some sailor. I mean, nothing like that. She's nice. She's not hinting around. But where is the question? It's deep inside me. It's deep in me. Honey, do you love me? She says, yeah, I love you. Why do you always ask me that? I said, do you really love me? Yeah, I do. And I said, why? And it took her a real long time to answer. So I don't ask her that anymore. But I want you to know, coming from a shamed background, where I did not have the advantage of developing all of these, because I come from a shamed background, I feel ashamed about myself. I honestly, this is not humility, this is sick. I don't see anything good. I don't see anything noble that's worthwhile. Now, isn't that sad? Now, if I really truly feel that way about myself, and I'm getting a lot better, I was really bad before. Now I look at all of you, and I know you're all like me. Before I didn't know that. I felt isolated, all alone, that I was the only nut. That I was the only person that felt like this. Whenever I have classes, I ask, and once people understand what we're talking about, they almost all raise their hand. They all feel inadequate and shamed at some level. And by their behavior, you can tell they're shamed. Now, if I really feel there's nothing good about me, not really good about me, two questions. Why? Where did I come from? Why did I ever get an idea like that? One. And two, how could I ever be really intimate? How could I feel safe to open up and to be loved and to really love? Well, I can't. And it's been hard. And to make up for that big void, to make up for that big hurt in me, to not ever feel adequate, my life has been a compensation. So I'm a workaholic. That's better than alcohol. But do you think my kids were just as neglected? Do you think Daddy was there for these kids? I was emotionally not there for them, except to correct them. Get in there and take care of that now. That isn't what they needed. They needed the affection. They needed to know that there was a man that had some feelings. They needed to know that Papa was afraid. Do you think I could ever show those kids that I was afraid? Do you think I ever could? No way, Jose. Do you think my kids ever saw me cry? Because men don't cry, man. Only weenies cry. Only twits cry. The car breaks down, you don't cry, you fix it. Somebody hits you, you knock it down, you get back up and hit them back. You don't cry. Crying doesn't do anything. See, this old macho stuff? Crying does a lot. When I finally got to a point at about age 50, when I could cry, I scared myself to death. Because I'd been stuffing that stuff so long. I'd just got this pressed down so long, I would never cry. Because, you see, to have emotions is to be out of control. To not be in control is the great fear of a dysfunctional family. Because if we're not in control, we can't keep hiding our shame. Make sense? So I'm always into control. I have to control everything. My kids, my work. So my life was really, really controlled. And then, when all of a sudden I reached a point where I couldn't control my life, I got to a point again, after a lot of struggle, where I could cry. And when I cried the first time in about 40 years, I just came from the bottom of my stomach, great, huge sobs. And you know how a little kid cries? You know how they do? Just sobs. I was crying. I was sitting here, disassociating, kind of watching what was happening to me. I could not believe. And I wept, and I wept, and I wept, and I cried over this son, who to me was lost at that point in time. Totally lost to drugs. Changed personalities. Well, I came to this crisis in my life then when I could not be in control anymore. And I had to look in other places for answers other than what I'd been taught. That all you do is get more powerful. If your things are not in control, then you need to get more powerful. And if the kid's out of hand, you need to get more powerful. And what does that develop in a home? More power and more power and more power. Till finally, when this kid breaks away, and they get out here at 18, 19, 20, do you think you can continue to control a kid? You cannot. I promise you, you can't. You can't keep your kids from doing drugs if they want to, unless you're going to tie a couple big guys on them and handcuff them and walk them back and forth to school. You can't keep your kids in. We would say good night, everybody, and go to bed, and somebody called me at 3 o'clock in the morning and says, hey, you got a kid named such, such, such? I'd say, yeah. Do you know where he is? Yeah, he's in bed. You know this story. Say, nah, well, you call me at 3 o'clock in the morning, you people crazy? Decent people are asleep. He says, well, your kid's over here and and this is happening and that's happening. No, my kid's in bed, man. You know, good night. Well, you better check the bed. I go in and check the bed, guess what? My kid's out partying. I can't control that kid. I thought about putting a lock-up cage in there and almost felt justified. I didn't do it. But to save his life from these druggies, can you see how a parent would think that? I was desperate. I was bankrupt for ideas. There was no place else to go. We ended up in the Phoenix House program, and we ended up in family therapy and individual therapy. We're trying to work through some of these issues. And they're painful. The great thing that I would like to accomplish today is to expose you to some of the tragedies, some of the principles, so that you maybe can think in terms of coming out of this denial. Because denial isn't that you deliberately deny something. Denial is that you really are unaware. You don't know. I didn't know my dad was an alcoholic. I didn't say the word alcoholic till I was 53 or 4 years old. We didn't acknowledge that. I was in denial all my life. And unfortunately, I had some kids and passed that stuff on. Now, what you don't work through, you pass on. What you deny gets passed on. Like 7% of what you communicate to your kids is verbal. You think you're doing a great job. But you want to know what you are really communicating? If you're not really understanding this, you're communicating your shame. And you're communicating your prejudices and your fears and your lousy outlook about yourself. And your lack of boundaries. This is what we communicate. And that's a sad, sad thing. All right. Do we kind of get an idea for this? Can you see where a kid would be if you allow them the right to make all these choices? That means that mom and dad have got to recognize that this child is a free agent and really owes you no allegiance as far as what they believe and what they want to be in life. I don't care if you're an attorney and there's been 100,000 attorneys in a row and this kid wants to be something else. There is no duty to you to be untrue to himself. And if he doesn't want that, then you've got to let it go. Give the child the right and the responsibility to live their own life.
See me crying, mama, make me smile, rock me in your arms a little while. ABC me crying, won't you love your child? EFG, I'm sorry, Daddy, take my hand. Tell me what I've done so bad. EFG, I wonder, why are you so mad? Don't you love me, Dad? Cross my heart, I swear, Mom, I won't cry no more. I'll just lay in silence down here on the floor. Cross my heart and hope to die if you don't want me anymore. 1, 2, 3 for you, Mom. I won't talk so loud, I won't laugh so hard, I'll shut my mouth. 1, 2, 3 for you, Mom. I won't make a sound. Do, re, mean and angry words are all I hear through my bedroom walls, Dad, loud and clear. Do, re, mi, I lie awake and shake with fear and wish I had no ear. Try to remember the child that once was you. Did you hide in the darkest corner of your lonely room and pray to God to help you through the long and lonely nights, afraid to holler, Mama, oh please come hold me tight. Go on and close your eyes, Mom. Take a little trip through time, Dad. Let it all come back to you. And give unto every child the love denied to you. And remember, the child will remember. And remember, the child will remember his whole life. you.